Some creatures are born to soar across the skies. Some are made to leap waterfalls, to swim against the current. And yet, sometimes, because of fate, the environment, or the quiet whispers of those who know nothing about dreams, we forget who we truly are. This is the story of a koi fish, not raised in crystal-clear waters, nor allowed to swim beneath mighty falls. It lived in a shallow, muddy puddle, surrounded by ordinary carp, never once realizing that within it flowed the blood of those destined to ascend the Dragon's Gate. A simple story, but one that might make you pause for a few seconds and ask yourself, am I living in a pond too small, for a dream too big? Back then, after a flash flood swept through the distant mountains, an old man living by a stream happened to walk past a patch of muddy puddles left behind in the aftermath. Amid the wreckage, murky water, floating branches, and tangled roots, he spotted a tiny creature struggling weakly. It was a small fish, its body caked in mud, scales mottled, and eyes filled with fear. With the calloused hands and quiet gaze of someone long acquainted with loss, the old man gently scooped up the little being. No one knew where it had come from. No one came looking for it, and he didn't really have a reason to keep it, except for a quiet instinct that told him this life deserved a chance. He brought the fish back to his small farm. There, behind his house, was a shallow pond, muddy, murky, filled with algae and silt, where common carp lazily swam in circles scavenging for food. He released the fish into the water, not knowing what kind it was, just thinking, it has water, it has food, that's enough. And so, the koi fish's story began. Not in a crystal-clear pond, not among vibrant schools of its kind, but in a swampy pit where the extraordinary was forced to blend into the ordinary. It grew up among carp that had no concept of swimming far. They lingered in one corner, fought over scraps of food, then buried themselves once more in the muddy depths. No one taught the koi how to swim upstream. No one ever told it was born to leap waterfalls, to shine with scales that shimmered like sunlight. All it learned was to bow its head, to stay quiet, to be just like every other fish here. And over time, it began to believe that. The koi lived like a carp, ate like a carp, reacted like a carp, until even it started to forget that it didn't quite look like the others. It had never swum farther than a few circles around the pond, never tasted the fresh waters of a mountain spring, never once looked up to see what lay beyond the overhanging branches above. In a place that's small, that confined, even the tiniest dream gets suffocated into silence. But just because you were placed in the mud doesn't mean you belong to it. Just because you were raised among the ordinary doesn't mean you don't carry the blood of the extraordinary. It's just that at that moment, the koi fish didn't yet know who it really was. Time passed. The once tiny koi fish had grown, but not in the light, not in freedom. It grew inside a shadow, far too small. The murky, shallow pond was still the only world it had ever known. The carp around it, though not cruel, never truly understood nor cared about its differences. They would always say things like, "Stop dreaming. The only real water is here in this pond." Or "Why bother swimming so much? The food always comes from above." Day by day, the koi heard these words until they became a quiet echo in its mind. And little by little, it stopped wondering. At first, there had been a flicker of curiosity, a pull towards something beyond the edge of the pond, where the light seemed a bit brighter. Once it tried to swim toward it, but an older fish quickly blocked its path. "That area is dangerous. Who do you think you are? No fish ever leaves this pond." Those words landed like a sentence, a judgment with no evidence. And worse than anything, the koi began to believe it. Its movements slowed. Its small dreams dissolved like bubbles. No longer drawn to the light, it sank into the muddy bottom of the pond. Mornings were spent fighting for scraps. Afternoons, drifting in stillness under the algae. Nights passed like they never really happened. Day after day, the same sad song on repeat. Somewhere deep inside, its heart still whispered with vague longings, but it learned to stay silent, even with itself. Maybe the most heartbreaking thing in life is not being locked in a cage, but being free and never knowing you have wings. And in those quiet, unchanging days, the koi fish was exactly that. It had trapped itself inside a box built by others, and convinced itself that box was safety. It swam like someone blind beneath the sunlight, never realizing it had been born to leap the dragon's gate, to become something greater. But some things sleep in your heart for a very long time, until one sudden moment stirs them awake. For the koi fish, that moment was coming, like a strange wind about to ripple across the still water. That summer, the heat was unlike anything before. The rains stopped coming. The stream that once fed the pond began to dry up, little by little. Each day, the waterline receded, revealing the dark, heavy, suffocating mud beneath. The carp began to panic. They pushed and shoved, desperate to reach the last pockets of water, gasping for the few breaths of air still clinging to the surface. And the koi fish, it moved slower. Its breathing grew heavier. Its body ached in a way it never had before. For the first time in its life, it felt fear, real, piercing fear. In the chaos, the koi rose near the surface, gasping for air. And then something strange happened. In the distance, at the edge of the stone wall that had always seemed like the end of the world, the water had lowered just enough to reveal a small crack. And through that crack, a beam of shimmering light spilled in. And in that light, the koi saw them, a group of fish unlike any it had ever seen. Their bodies were long, fluid, full of strength and purpose. Their scales were ablaze with color, red, gold, white, dancing like fire. But more than that, it was how they moved, with power, with grace, with pride. They didn't shy away from the light. They raced toward the waterfall, like warriors returning to a sacred temple. For the first time in its life, the koi fish saw others like itself. Not carp, not dull shadows lost in the mud, but free spirits, swimming toward a dream. A spark flared in its mind, like an old flame inside its chest had just been reignited. It looked at itself, the long tail it had once been ashamed of, the shimmering scales that made it feel out of place. Now they matched those magnificent fish exactly. Of course, it was a koi, not a carp, not a nobody, not something forgotten or left behind. It was born to swim far, to leap waterfalls, to grow in the light, not to slowly fade away in the mud. And then, from the deepest corner of its soul, a voice rose, quiet but unmistakable. You're still alive. You still have a chance. Don't wait any longer. And in that very moment, for the first time in all those years, the koi fish lifted its head high and looked straight toward the light, the place its heart had always belonged to, even if it had never dared to believe. That night, the pond was eerily still. No more splashes, no frantic darting for food. The carp lay motionless in the thick mud, exhausted, resigned, silent. But the koi couldn't sleep. Something inside it was stirring, wide awake. The image of those brilliant fish leaping toward the waterfall burned bright in its mind. The light through the stone cracks still shimmered across its scales like a whisper it could no longer ignore. In that deep, quiet moment, the koi began to swim upward, alone, slowly, but with purpose. It moved toward the crack in the stone, toward the sliver of light slicing through the muddy water. The other carp shifted faintly. One noticed and murmured, "Where are you going? Stay here. It's safer." Another warned, "Don't be foolish. No one gets out. Who do you think you are?" But this time, the koi didn't turn back. It didn't need to argue. It didn't need their approval, because now it knew one thing for certain. No one gets to define its limits except itself. With every ounce of strength, it surged toward the narrow gap, pushing through. Mud clung to its scales. Weeds tangled around its body. But it kept going. The water on the other side was colder, clearer, and it seemed to whisper something ancient and true. Keep swimming. You're on the right path. And then, as it finally squeezed through that last tight space, the world opened. Before the koi lay a vast, endless current. Deep, alive, filled with light. Cool, rushing water wrapped around it, like the embrace of something it had always longed for, but never fully known. Above, the great waterfall roared, white, thunderous, unstoppable. But strangely, the koi didn't feel fear. It felt longing, a hunger to rise, a pull to finally be who it was meant to be. For the first time in its life, the koi swam against the current, not to prove anything, not to rebel, but because something deep within had always whispered for this moment. With each meter it climbed, its body grew stronger. The tired tail, now powerful. The delicate fins, now slicing water like wings. The rushing waves slammed against it. The currents tried to pull it down, but nothing, not pain, not fear, not doubt, could drown out the voice now roaring inside its soul. I was not born to die in the mud. I was born to climb the waterfall. I was born to become a dragon. The final waterfall, tall, steep, and thunderous, stood like a towering test of destiny. At its base, the koi gasped for breath, its body bruised and bleeding from the climb. But in its eyes burned a light never seen before, the light of unwavering belief. No more fear, no more doubt. Just one question remained. If not now, then when? And so, it leapt. The water struck hard. Sharp rocks tore at its scales. Each slip backward felt like its soul was shattering. But every time it fell, it rose again. Every breathless moment, it fought harder. There was no applause, no one waiting at the top. Only the sky, vast, blue, endless, stretching out like the dream it once glimpsed, as a small fish peeking through murky water. And then, in a moment no clock could measure, the koi broke past the crest of the waterfall. In that instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rushing water paused in an eternal second. Sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting gold across its battered body. And a miracle began. Its scales began to shimmer. Its tail grew longer. Its form softened, then surged with power. It was no longer a fish. It had become a dragon, a new soul, born from courage, forged through resilience, and shaped by the choice to defy fate. It would no longer live in the mud, no longer shrink beneath labels, no longer carry the burden of other people's dreams. Now, it lived as it was always meant to, radiant, sacred, and true, and high above the world. The koi, now a dragon cloaked in gleaming gold, soared through the clouds, strong, free, magnificent. It was no longer the different one among the old carp. It was fully itself, and nothing less than extraordinary. Do you see it now? You are that koi. You've lived in a small pond, a place called limits, judgment, or comfort. You've been told you weren't enough, not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough. And somewhere along the way, you believed it. But the truth is, you were born to become a dragon. Your strength is already within you. Your freedom is a choice you can make. And that great waterfall, no matter how high, is still waiting for you to rise. So don't spend your life in the mud, just because someone told you. You were never meant to fly. Live, as if you know deep down, you were born to rise straight into that brilliant sky. You know, we all have our own little pond, a small, limited place, where we were born and raised, where other people's words are treated as truth, and where most of us spend our entire lives. Just surviving, not truly living. Maybe you were like the koi once, different, curious, full of questions, but slowly you learn to stay quiet, to shrink yourself, just to fit in. You've heard it all before. That's impossible. That dream's too far. Play it safe. Don't try anything risky. But here's something the world will never tell you. You were never just a common carp. You never were. You were born a koi, vibrant, proud, and filled with quiet strength. And if you're brave enough to believe that, to rise beyond the old pond you've outgrown, then one day you'll become a dragon. Life out there won't be easy. Every waterfall is fierce. Every doubt is heavy. But if you dare to swim, even slowly, even tired, even alone, then every inch you move forward will be a victory. Every scar will prove your courage. And then, in a moment that feels completely ordinary, you'll realize you made it. You've become who you were always meant to be. Don't wait until your pond runs dry to seek change. Don't wait until it's too late to lift your head and look toward the light, because that light has always been there, and the dragon you long to become. It's been inside you all along. So if you're quietly living a life someone else drew for you, stop just for a moment. Look within and ask yourself, is this really the life I want? Am I living like a carp? Well, my heart is aching to soar like a dragon. You don't need permission to change. You just need one decision, one swim against the current, one moment of fierce belief in yourself. Today, not tomorrow, begin. Swim. Even if you can't see the end, just swim. Because at the end of that road, there's not just freedom. There's you, the brightest, strongest, most honest version you were always meant to be. We all start small, a tiny pond, a boundary, a belief quietly crushed by the words of others. But do you know something? Even the most confined pond, there are still those who carry the dream of the sky in their hearts. Not because they're stronger, but because they dare to dream. Not because they're special, but because they dare to be different. You're the koi, and that waterfall, the hardship, the challenge, the failure, it's not there to stop you. It's there to shape you into a dragon. So don't spend your whole life in a narrow pond, whispering to yourself, I wish I could, live, so that at the end of the road, you can smile and say, I climbed the waterfall. I became the dragon. I lived as who I truly am.